You're up there, sir.
Good evening, folks. My name is Tommy T. I'm an alcoholic. I'm very happy to be here. And Phil, thanks for being so accommodating when I logged on a week before to tell you, oh my God, I did it again. I heard someone saying before when they were asked possibly to be a chairman, like, I don't remember anything. And I still write everything down and I still mess it up. So I double book quite often. And just one of those character defects that don't seem to be going away 27 years down the road. My sober date is April 8th, 1995. I think it's fair to tell you I'm a little under the weather. I'm in the house for 13 days now, going a little stir crazy. Got diagnosed with COVID a couple of weeks ago. And it started out as a respiratory thing for a couple of days that were uncomfortable, to say the least. And then just switched over to some type of like stomach viral thing. And I just can't seem to shake it. But there was no way I was going to miss tonight, Phil, and call you again, because I know there will be a time I'll meet you and I'll have to pay the face-to-face price for that. So I'm very happy to be here, because along with that 13 days in the house, and maybe some of you can relate with it with all this that's going on, regardless of the phone calls, regardless of jumping on Zoom and listening to a meeting once in a while, my sponsees have not been able to come over. I really had no human contact outside my immediate family, and that's been at a distance. And it's created a disconnect that I used to live with my whole life and not even know I had one. But now that I've been so accustomed to an AA life for many years, and to know that that's not the way God wants us to feel or go through life, it's not comfortable. So I'm in that little weird place in AA has us every now and then where some might say we're off the beam or we're disconnected. And so we'll just let it rip tonight. And I'll tell you what it was like for me and what AA did for me and what it's like now. And we'll see where we end up, and we'll see if we can kill some time here and have some fun. Like I said, I always grew up with that disconnect as a young kid. I never felt good enough. I never felt, strong enough, good enough in sports. I was good in sports. I was a decent looking kid. The girls liked me. I was just too afraid to talk to them. When I played sports, I played with like a tightness of chest that I just got nervous every time I got up at bat, or every time I had a game. It was just difficult for me to go through these other things. And what made it worse was I spent a lifetime of looking at other people, and by the way that they put themselves out there, I felt that's how they must really be. And that's not how I was. So I always felt so different than everybody. I mean, I came from an alcoholic home. My sister was a drug addict. My mother started to drink for a while when I was in my early teens, because she just had enough with my father, who was an everyday drinker. And, so things got crazy here. And it was kind of like, you didn't want to invite kids over the house because you never knew what was going to go on. Ours was the house that the cops were at quite often. Like, we would paint those yellow lines in front to save the cop car a parking spot. It got so bad there for a few years. And then once I started, taking off, it really, the four of us were you never know who the one was getting locked up was. And, I'm a guy that went through DWI class 3 times, and once with my father. He got arrested 2 days before me, and that was just miserable. He's drunk in class every night, and I'm trying to get my license back. And we're sitting there watching a family movie called Not My Father's Son, and I'm like, oh my God, this is us, And afterwards he says, what a bunch of shit that was, huh, son? And I'm like, wait a minute, that could have been called the Tarracos, alcoholism, right? A disease of perception. But I always looked at like everybody else's life was, quote, normal. I hated the word normal. And my life was anything but normal. And I didn't know what to do about it. And I hung tough as long as I could. I have to tell you, I was a liar. I was a cheat. And I was a thief before I drank alcohol. I did those things. I don't know out of what type of soul sickness, but I did those things as a young kid in elementary school. And I held on as long as I could without any alcohol or other substances. But at 11, I busted out, and a couple of kids asked me to drink, and I said yes. And the animal was let out of the cage, because that very first night that I drank differently. I know now in hindsight, I drank differently than those two other guys I was with. They were putting their caps on the beers. They were saving some for the next night. I drank mine all the way down. I pushed a kid down. I took his, started drinking his, got sloppy, went after the third kid's beer. He threw me a beating. I woke up 4 hours late, 2 o'clock in the morning. That's a problem at 11. I'm supposed to be in at when the street lights go on. I'm supposed to be on the front porch, and I'm blacked out somewhere, getting knocked out down behind a store in the woods. And that pretty much sums up 23 years of drinking for me. I always drank to excess. Once I start, that phenomenon of craving kicks in, and I just cannot stop my drinking. I either pass out, get arrested, or some other outside force will stop my drinking, but I won't stop it. I never have. I remember when I was going through the big book with my sponsor, and it said the average temperate drinker does not experience this. And I said, well, George, there were a few times that I didn't have that phenomenon of craving. I was able to go back to work after having some drinks at lunch, knowing that I was going to go back out after work. He said, it says never, Tom, never, not once out of every 10. So, I mean, I was looking for outs when we got in that big book. I was trying to say that I was different and it didn't apply to me. I had a lot of good people along the way, teachers and guidance counselors and priests and uncles and aunts. And I can't tell you how many times as a young teenager, I got sat down and got the talk about my 4 alcoholic uncles. At that point, 2 had already died from alcoholism when I was very young. Later, to have my father and his other brother die of it later on. No tobacco man, my grandmother used to say, has ever successfully handled alcohol, Tom. You have to be real careful. And, warning I did not heed, just like out of the big book. And all these people would tell me these things and tell them me in all good conscience, and they meant well. And I even did like some very therapeutic stuff in groups and kid groups and things like that my mom tried to put me in. She tried everything with me. And it just made me go worse. But, they would tell me that, I came from such a dysfunctional family, that this was what happens. And I had a crazy childhood, they would tell me. And I can tell you now, after 26 years of membership in Alcoholics Anonymous and some really strong sponsorship over the years, that the only thing dysfunctional about my family was my expectations of it and how I wanted them all to live their lives just to make me feel better. I wanted them to treat me special so I could feel normal. And the only thing crazy about my childhood is that it lasted 35 years. I mean, that is really the only deal there. So the therapeutic thing didn't take for me, although I got a lot of information. I knew I was alcoholic, very young. It didn't stop me from drinking. We would make jokes about it. What's the difference between an alcoholic and a drunk? The alcoholic goes to meetings. I mean, that's the crew I grew up in. And we just, this is what we do. We get drunk. When we got a DWI in this neighborhood, it was like, hey, what'd you blow? Oh, I blew a 3.2. Come on, you got to get that up there higher. That's what the old guys would say to you. I mean, you didn't drink in this neighborhood. You had to move. It was bizarre. And as my drinking got worse and other substances creeped into the picture, I just migrated to those people that drank and did things like I did. So I felt okay. So I would start out with my friends that were able to get married, my friends that were able to go to college and graduate, my friends that were able to have a life and still be hard drinkers. I would drop them off at 3 a.m. and then I'd go get lost for 3 or 4 days. And I was classic at binging and just going out and then, being so mortified at what had happened already, think I could stay sober for a while, white knuckle it for a while, put a few days together, and then my mind would just take me back out there and say, you're not that bad, Tom. You haven't drank in 7 days. You went to work every day this week. What are you doing? You went to school at night. You're doing good. And then I would go out and I would pull it back down on my head with a sense of senseless sprees. I did it over and over and over again. And, there's a lot of things that happened through that. that I'm not very proud of, but I think it's fair to tell you folks the kind of man you have sitting in front of you, the kind of man that I was, or the kind of boy that I was back then. Uh, they were terminated pregnancies where I was not man enough to go and support the woman. I would think I was a big shot for paying for it. And then I would go to the bar and I wouldn't even go and show up. I wouldn't support them. And then the relationship would crash. There was 23 broken relationships in as many years. In the 23 years I drank, I never made it past a year with any one woman. There's a lot of harm caused in that. I got my childhood sweetheart pregnant when I was 17 and she was 16, and she came from a real big Christian family, and to have an abortion was just not going to happen. And we put that child up for adoption because they didn't want her daughter to have anything to do with a guy like me. And horrible, horrible. Matthew's 43 years old. I still have not met him. That's one thing that God, in his time, I guess, or maybe never in his time, but that's just something that's out there. I have a letter in my jewelry box. I have pictures of him ready in case some big, good-looking Norwegian kid knocks on my door, but it hasn't happened to date. And these are the things, without a God in your life, without a program of recovery in your life, they just eat your soul. They just eat your soul. My grandmother was a kind and loving Christian woman, and she always tried to take care of me, and she was kind of made me her favorite because I reminded her so much of her baby, my father. And when she was dying of cancer, I stole money from her, money that if I would have asked her for, she would have gave to me. And the last thing that I said to my grandmother before I died was lying about that money. I mean, that was the one that just ripped my heart out and did it. Cracking up cars, fights, illegal things, crimes, that all came along with the territory. But I can tell you, I was at 34 years old. I got sober at 35. At 34, I wasn't getting many invites to go anywhere, let alone a second chance to speak at a group in Tennessee. I could tell you that. The arrests came, and I thought that was just normal from the lifestyle we led and all this. And I never, ever wanted to end up in AA. I even have a book. I still have it. I will never get rid of this book. It says, When AA Doesn't Work for You. That's the title of the book. I mean, I tried everything else but you folks, And the last 5 years of my drinking were a little sketchy and binge-like because of the fact that I became like a periodic drinker. My life, I was out on my own. I was doing okay on the outside. I became an engineer in the Department of Education. I was making decent money, had my own place, and all the calamity that comes with that. And I would go out, and every now and then I would reward myself on a Friday night. I would go to a neighborhood bar here, and I'd order a Jack Daniels and a beer, and I'd knock those down. And if a young lady would come into the bar, well, really, if any woman would come into the bar, I'm your guy. There's only 365-year-old guys there. It's not a big crowd I'm playing against at this point. I'm not drinking in nightclubs. I'm drinking in a place with sawdust on the floor and a shuffleboard table, and the F-bomb is every other word. I mean, it's just a real dive of a neighborhood place. And a lot of times I would, what we would say is get lucky, and that woman would come back to my apartment with me, and I would remember her name. I would take her out to breakfast in the morning. She still liked me in the morning. I did not turn into a stupid asshole like I normally do when I drink, because going with her back to my apartment slowed the drinking down somewhat. The romantic evening slowed the drinking down somewhat. And I would drop her off, and I would open the door, and I would be a gentleman, and I would get back to my apartment Saturday morning, and the mind, I remember you could almost smell smoke coming out of my head the way that it was working on me. You're not that bad. You're making too big of a deal here. You can drink. You just have to do it on the weekends. What's wrong with you? It was like that angel and the devil thing all the time. And so I'd go back out that Saturday night, and I'd order that same shot of Jack Daniels, that same beer, but no woman would come into the bar. And the bar would close at about 2, 3 o'clock back then. And I would go out to like what I love what Bill calls it in the big book, the most sordid places on earth, because that's where my peeps are, man. That's where I'm going to feel okay doing the things I'm about to start doing. And all the other substances came into play. And I would just go on a tear. Like I said, I'm a 3-4 day guy once I get started. I go for 3 or 4 days. And, I would wake up and it'd be Tuesday. You know, I got a cross-dressing guy next to me in the bed. I don't know how that happened. You know, it was crazy. Again, all right. I reach into my pocket and see if I have any money to get home, and I don't know where I am. I'm looking out the blinds, and I pull out some paper, and there's 5 ATM slips there, or 5 ATM slips. I wiped out the bank account. I can't even pay my rent. And it was, how did I do this again? How did I do this again? Because I didn't do it once. I didn't do it twice. I did it 50 times in those 5 years. And it was brutal. It was brutal. And my mind, I'd be able to stay sober depending on the calamity for a while. Look, you have a fist fight with a 65-year-old guy. Hey, everybody has a fist fight. That guy's an asshole. I'm going to stay sober for 2 weeks, right? Crack up my car without a car. Now I'm on a bus. Can't do a lot of damage on a bus. That'll be a month until I get a new car, right? The cross-dressing dude, all right, 2 months. That was a little messed up, you know. So well, that was, but that's how I lived for those last 5 years, and the mental torture. I think Bill just captures it so well in our big book. It was horrible, and that brought me to like April 6th, 1995, and I just went out for a few with the guys. I don't know all the details, but I can tell you it was like that first night because I went into a blackout. I don't know all the details of it, but I do know the details of the charges. The charges were possession of a loaded handgun with intent to use it, possession of illegal narcotics, and drunk driving. And I was faced with a year in jail because in New York, it was a mandatory year in jail if you had a loaded handgun with one in the chamber, and I did. And I was not a gun toter. You know, I had gotten beaten for some drugs a couple weeks earlier. And in my best thinking, when I'm hammered, I put that gun in my belt, my home defense gun, and I was going to shoot a guy that night. And looking back at it, what a blessing those cops got me before I did something that could have changed the trajectory for my life in a whole different way. You know, I don't normally tell this, but I was with a guy that night. I picked him up at after hours. Seemed like a swell guy. He's doing life for murder in New York State. And he was going to be the first one executed in many, many years. See, the courts got me scared. They got me scared. I did not want to do a year in jail. I get very frightened when that comes up. And so they gave me treatment against street crime. They gave me probation. They gave a very strict program of recovery I had to get due and be verified. They gave the same thing to him, but he took off. He continued to do the things we were doing, and he broke into his girlfriend's apartment while she was at work to get money while he was on a drug binge. And that girl's daughter was cutting out of high school that day and came home and caught him. And he freaked out and he stabbed her 76 times. And when we hear that saying, there but the grace of God, I could have done something very similar with that handgun because I'm not right when I'm in that frame of mind. When I'm drinking 2 or 3 days, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, you can be held responsible for your actions, but you're not responsible for them if you drink like I drink. I don't even know where I am most of the time, let alone what I'm going to do. And, you know, that fear of going to jail sobered me a bit, but I still fought AA. I did all my probation. I did all my AA. I had my ex-wife. Oh, I neglected to tell you, I walked out on a woman in 1985 while she was pregnant. We did get married. I tried to do the right thing. I gave her the best 6 weeks of my life. And, you know, and she didn't want me to have anything to do with the boy. When we broke up, I ran out on her she was 8 months pregnant. She came out of the woodwork at the same time of this felony gun arrest and everything, and was asking for 8 years of back child support. So, you know, I kind of laugh when I see the newcomers, you know, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm in a long-term treatment. What are you doing after that? Well, I'm going to go to a halfway house. And what are you going to do after that? I'm going to go to a 3/4 house. And then what are you going to do after that? And, you know, like they got this 2.5 years of like coasting recovery, and I am not putting it down. If it works, God bless you. But man, I had to be at a probation officer's thing, a cop deposition, a court appearance. I had to be blood tested or urine tested. I had somewhere to go, either Superior Court or criminal court or family court for that whole first year. I mean, thank God it worked out that way for me, because with so many things hanging over my head, I have the ability to put things together and try to get my shit together and get out of a jam yet one more time. It's just something I was always able to do. And I did that. The outpatient program started to dwindle. They started to graduate me from those outpatient. Everybody said, go to AA, go to AA. I said, I'm not going to AA, you know. And then finally one guy got me and he said, come on, man, right after our group, it's across the street. It was a place called Randall Manor here on Staten Island. And it was a beginners meeting. And I walked in, and I'm not kidding you, everybody in the room was 60 years plus. Everybody in the room was a guy, and everybody had gray hair or no hair. And I'm like, oh no, this is not happening. I am not doing this. And on Staten Island, I please don't ever say anything I'm saying is knocking the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it was all fellowship on Staten Island. The big book was not mentioned. It was a dirty, well-kept secret on Staten Island in 1995. And I listened to an hour of guys complain about their wives, their jobs, their kids, used the saltier language than we used in the bars. I was like, my God, the only thing different here is they're drinking coffee instead of booze. When's a fight going to break out? And sure enough, in the corner, there's a fight. I mean, it was insane AA. But I got to tell you, for that hour, I felt okay. It was weird. I felt okay. They had the same shitstorm of a life that I had, and I wasn't alone. And that little piece, that little spark got me to come back. And I have met the most amazing, amazing people in Alcoholics Anonymous since I've been here. And there is absolutely no coincidences here. The sponsor I needed when I needed him showed up. The mentor that I needed when I needed him showed up. The friend I needed when I needed him showed up. And I was brought through these steps by a bald-headed bookie in Brooklyn named George. And he had just gone through a workshop, and it was kind of a secret, sneaky, big book Nazi workshop on Staten Island. You had to it was like a speakeasy, you know. Who knows? How do you know anybody? All right, come on in, bring your big book. Don't let anybody see you, you know. And they went through it, but this boy was on fire, and him and 3 other old men got me on the golf course because I lost my job here from the arrest. And I was crying in a men's meeting one night. I lost my 17-year career with the Department of Education, blah, 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 blah. And the fellowship was so great, you know. George came over and said, God, Tom, there's 3 billion men in China don't even know you work for the Department of Education. You'll be fine. Just stay with us here in AA, you know. And he said, God wants you on the golf course tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I said, didn't you hear what I said? I don't have any money. He said, we didn't ask you for a financial statement. We asked you to play golf. We're picking you up. Be ready. I was ready. And these guys took me on that golf course. And if you ask them the story now, one of the guys has passed away. They were characters. One guy was Lucky George, the bald-headed bookie. Another guy was Keep It Simple Richard. He was a retired fireman. And the other guy was Cocaine Vinny, a little guy, like really meticulously dressed, you know, just, they were all 30 years older than me. And but man, these guys are great. And they just listened to my newcomer nonsense. They had a talent for listening that I don't think I still possess. I know I don't possess it with my wife. I'm still working on that. I'm a work in progress there. The newcomers I'm a little better with, you know, family members I struggle with sometimes. But these guys started throwing me a pitch, and they put me in the cart with George at the 9th hole, and George started to give me the big book pitch. You know, Tom, this is your choice that you feel like this. Well, what do you mean it's my choice? You're not in AA. You're in the fellowship. We have 3 sides of a triangle. And he started laying it out to me. And he said, I can guarantee you, I'll promise you, you never have to feel as bad as you do today ever again in your life if you're willing to take the actions that are laid out in the first 164 pages of the big book. I'd never heard anybody say that in 18 months in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just lost my job. I had absolutely nothing else to do. I had nothing going for me. I was living on my mother's couch $38,000 in debt. George said, look, if you're willing to come to my house 2 nights a week, I'll cook dinner. We'll read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll give you a cassette tape to reinforce what we're going to read. If you're willing to do what's there, I'm not going to tell you to do anything. If you're willing to do what's in that book, you'll have a spiritual experience that'll overcome this, and you're going to live a life that you can't even imagine exists. And he was such a solid salesman of AA. He wasn't pushing it down my throat. He was giving me an option, but he made that option so attractive. And plus, I heard free dinner. I knew he was Italian. I figured, how bad could it be? I get 2 of my meals a week. I'll eat good 2 days a week. So I went, and I had a wonderful experience, a miraculous experience. And I hope if you've gone through these 12 steps, I hope your experience was just that way. We read the doctor's opinion, and I said, oh my God, all the people that were telling me, I knew now why I didn't listen to anybody, because they weren't Lucky George. They didn't drink the way I drank. They didn't do the things we did. They were counselors, they were priests, they were teachers, they were parents. But one alcoholic talking to another, there's some power there. And I felt it with George. And I got that feeling of hope, where kind of like when you're active, you know, when you get paid at work and you're like, you're not drunk yet, you're not even at the bar yet, but I know it's going to be okay. I got 500 in my pocket. Like, I'm going to get there. It's cool. It's cool. I can breathe, right? I'm not so tense anymore. I used to get that way going to George's house. I was like psyched up to go to George's house and read with my sponsor. And we went through these 12 steps, and we went through them fairly quickly. I don't think our whole process took 3 months, going twice a week. George spent a lot of time with me in the first step to make sure that he knew that I was screwed. And when we got to step 2, I was not having the God stuff at all. I thought that I had done so many bad things, no God could ever love me. But what came out of it was, I knew for a fact that I screwed it up on my own, and I couldn't run my own life. So why not give this a chance? We got down and said a 3rd step prayer. I didn't understand the 3rd step prayer, and who does? I mean, if we sat newcomers down and said, okay, now you're going to be a servant for God the rest of your life. Are you ready? Everybody's balking on 3, right? Nobody's going to go any further than that. But I said that prayer with George. I came up and he pulled out a little marble notebook and he said, okay, now we're going to write inventory. I said, whoa, 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 2 steps in a night. You get a little crazy now. You know, I didn't want to write a 4th step inventory. But the way George laid it out, column by column, I wrote it right there. It took me 9 days to write. I think I had about 96 resentments on my list. And, wrote that all out. When I got to fear, I thought I was a tough guy. I wrote down, tell George you're afraid of everything and everybody. I could not believe the things that went down on that fear inventory. I was just a scared little boy in a big 35-year-old man's body, and I did not know how to live. When we looked at the relationships, I had 23 what we called substantial relationships here on Staten Island. The definition of substantial relationship was knew the woman's last name. Sorry, ladies, no offense, you know, but that made them substantial if you knew the woman well enough. Everybody else went into the one-night stand category. And it's kind of hard to look at 23 relationships that went the exact same way and not realize you're the common denominator. But then George explained it to very well, that all of your problems are of your own making, and you should thank God every single day that they are, because you and God can do something about them. If your relationship problem was those 23 women, you'd have to keep looking and you'd keep finding the same exact women. But if you become a different man, you'll attract a different woman, you'll be fine. I can tell you, 27 years down the road, it's absolutely true. When a sponsee is having trouble with his wife now, or having a problem, and I said, let me ask you, what kind of husband are you? All of a sudden they get real quiet. I don't know why. You know, oh, I get it. You'll help the sponsees. You'll go paint the guy's house with them. You'll do this and that. But your wife actually take out the garbage and you gave her nonsense? Are you kidding me? I got this guy, Mike B's, on screen 1 with me here. He's one of my Staten Island guys. Mike will tell you, I don't want to call him and talk to him about my wife. He tells me to go wash the dishes. You know, so I mean, go do something nice for her. You know, she's your substantial relationship. Are you treating your wife and your kids like you do your sponsees? Are you that kind and loving in your own home? And George taught me all this stuff. I didn't understand 6 and 7 when we went through it. I balked on 9. I have some great 9-step experiences that I could share with you, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the life that we get in 10, 11, and 12. So I did make all of my amends. Big emphasis on all. There is a big difference between making the majority of our amends and feeling better and making all of them and having a clean soul. Anybody here, there's a lot of people on this meeting. If you have time and there's that one that you're not thinking about, I'm going to tell you one story about a guy I just met at the Florida State Convention. We were asked to go down there. Jimmy was with me from Jersey. He was taping the event. We had a blast that weekend. I mean, Jersey does not care. They don't even know COVID happened. I mean, I think they turned off the TVs down there. 2,000 people, maybe 15 had masks and they were in wheelchairs. I mean, it was crazy. But we're down there and I tell the basic same story that I'm just telling you folks. And a guy comes up to me in the line and he's shaking my hand and he says, "Can you make some time for me this weekend? I really need to talk to you." And he just seemed different. And I said, "Sure, pal." I said, "Look, stand on the side. I'll give you my number." I gave him my number. And I give him the number and I get a call at 7:30 the next morning. So I know this guy's got something going on, And his name was Pat. He was a retired detective from Newark, New Jersey. A tough old dude, tough old Irish guy, Sober 17 years, living a fairly good life. And he says, "I'll buy you coffee. I'm down in the lobby." I said, I'm just getting out of the shower. I'll be down in 5 minutes. And I sit down with Pat and he says, "I'm just going to get right out to it because I think I'm going to cry if I don't. I can't believe you told my deepest, darkest secret in front of 2,000 people last night." And I said, "What, the cross-dressing dude? Come on, Patty. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in the 5th step over the years." And I start laughing, right? And he says, No, this is serious. I've never told anybody that." And I said, "You just told me, Pat." And his whole face changed. And I said, and you're going to tell your sponsor today?" He said, "I can't do it. I've been lying to him for 17 years. And I said, "And you are going to make his day by telling him. You are going to make his day, Pat. I've had guys tell me stuff like that, and I just light up inside. Do that for your sponsor." "I don't know if I could do that, blah, 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 blah." And so we finish the coffee. We give each other a big hug, walk away as two sick men in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm kind of chuckling about the whole conversation. And I get a call at about 2:30 in the afternoon. My phone's blowing up. I step out of the meeting that was going on, and it's Pat. He says, "I just told my sponsor." And I said, "And what'd he say?" He said, "I knew you were holding something back. I am so happy that you told me this, Patty. Now we can really get down to some work." And I said, "Pat, that's great. I am so happy for you. Come up to the meeting room. I'm up here. We'll sit for the meeting together." He says, "I'm on my way up." So he comes and he sits. And I said, "So listen, you think you could tell your wife by tomorrow?" He says, Stop with this. I can't tell my wife." I said, "You've been with her 40 years, Patty. She knows you're a knucklehead. You're not going to surprise her. Tell her." So nothing from Pat. 2 weeks later, I'm at home group. I get a phone. I step out of my home group. I never even look at my phone at home group. It's Pat. I told my wife and I said, "What'd she say?" She laughed at me and called me an asshole. I said, "That's great, Patty. Now you work on telling sponsees and helping other people with that story. I am so happy for you." That's what we get. That's what we get here. We get freedom from those things that we never thought we could make right, that we could never turn around. And that's one little story about so many different times that's happened. And then we go into steps 10, 11, and 12, and that's where that principle of all our problems of our own making becomes so big and so strong. See, because I call this program of Alcoholics Anonymous our unfair advantage. I really don't know how the street tough guy makes it through a full life. I mean, they use alcohol and drugs, of course, and they do some bad things, but I know I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it without a sponsor. I couldn't make it without the guys in my home group. I couldn't make it without attending some meetings and seeing how crazy my thinking is on a daily basis, 26 years removed from alcohol and drugs. I couldn't sleep the other night, just 2 nights ago. I ran every horrible scenario financially that could possibly happen to in retirement. Now realize I'm retiring from the job that fired me back those years. I got that job back and promotions like crazy. They're going to pay me the rest of my life. But my sick head, 26 years sober, will tells me it's not going to be enough. So I'm losing sleep over this. Homesick with COVID, untreated, sitting in the house. And all I got to do is call one of you guys and just mention it. And they're like, you're kidding me, right? You're kidding me. You didn't even have a job. You were in a better mood than this. Are you kidding me? Like the guys that know me, right? Like normal people don't get that. We get it and we expect it every day. We get it all the time. You know, nowadays, if you got a bad toothache, you call your dentist and all right, come in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I'm dying here, right? Call your hair cutter, right? Oh, yeah, I could take you in February. February? What's that? Call an AA guy up. Hey, I'm going through some shit. What are you doing? Put the coffee pot on. I'm on my way over. That's what I get up here. AA is always willing to reach out their hand and help me. And that's the way I've been brought up through this thing, that we take service commitments. We don't make them like convenience. We do what we have to do. But in steps 10, 11, and 12, we look at our behavior on a daily basis. You know, Jimmy A from Jersey is my service sponsor. He's taught me a lot of stuff over the last couple of years. But he's taught me more about being a husband and a father than he's taught me about being an AA member. And sometimes with unspoken words, just by telling me a story about him and his son on the golf course. Or Mikey B, a guy I sponsor. He's got 3 daughters. God bless him. I'd drink every day if I had 4 women in my house. Forget it. We can't handle the 2 we got. And an amazing thing happens. That guy that abandoned children, that guy that ran out on women that were pregnant, I have 3 stepchildren now. I'm in the same relationship with a woman for 15 years. She's my best friend. She's my best friend. I say that without hesitation. I love her. I do service for her. And what do I do by trying to be the best husband every day using steps 10 and 11? I got the best wife in the world. And no matter what I'm going to go through, I'm not going to go through it alone. I'm going to go through it with God and my family. These are words I could not have told you or even imagined 26 years ago. It just wasn't in my vocabulary. It wasn't in my mindset. I couldn't imagine it. But by taking a look at things, and I've been tested many times with 3 stepkids, two boys and a girl. And then I have my son, Brett, came to live with me. And we had a blended family where we were all living together for a while. Brett's clean for 7 years now. Brett's got a lot more than good looks from his dad, I can tell you that. But they call each other brother and sister. We are the tightest knit, fun-loving, fun family. When we got quarantined, we watched 23 Marvel movies in sequence every Saturday. Somebody picked the dinner, somebody picked the dessert. And these kids, and these are all adult kids, 20s to 35. Nobody missed one. I can't imagine what it would have been like hanging out with my family and my parents like that when I was in my 20s. I was running as far away from this place as I possibly could. And me and my wife, we just look at each other, and she's in our fellowship as well. We almost tear up because we're so blessed. You know, many times I've been tested with the boys and things like this where they push and they push. You know, if you're a parent, you know, it's a tough thing. And fears come up in us. And my first reaction is slap or or punch somebody or something like that. I had a stepdaughter tested me all the time. You're not my father kind of stuff, all that stuff. And I had a great sponsor, Joe, for 23 years. And he would tell me, you're the adult. You're in recovery. You bear the brunt of this. You cannot overreact. They're children. They're assholes. They just tend to be assholes. You cannot be an asshole. You had your asshole time already. It's over. And he walked me through this stuff. And I've never, people might say, oh, you're full of this. 15 years in this house, I've never raised my voice. That's not me. That's God. Now, when they kid around and they say, we can tell you anything. You never lose your temper. I said, oh, don't kid yourself. I'm like a duck on the pond. Underneath the water, my legs are going like this. I've throat punched each and every one of you multiple times. Believe me. When I walk out on the deck, It's not just to say hello to God. It's because I need him, and they all laugh, but they know that's the life I'm leading. And I wouldn't have the relationships I have now with these kids if I would have lost my temper, if I would have been that guy that I was in my 30s. They would not come to me with everything. Sometimes I don't want them to come to me. I'm telling you, like, hey, Dad, can I talk to you? Oh, Jesus, give me a minute. I gotta like go get sent somewhere. You don't know what's gonna hit you. Oh. But then comes your birthday. Well, then comes Christmas. And that little card that comes, and they say you're the best dad ever. Does that make right all the wrongs I did over the years? No. But it heals my heart. It heals my heart. And I got that here in AA. And I got that from talking to men in AA who have been through the exact same things as I've been through. None of us are that unique. You all want to think you're special. I get it. You don't understand. My problem's different. That should be our banner right over our convention. You don't understand. We're all different. But we're not. We're not. We struggle through our lives with our fears and our emotions to a heightened extent, and we do the very best we can. And then we find this great thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and we start to do things for other people, and we start to put other people's wants first. We become good citizens. We become good citizens, and we just help another person out. I work in the Department of Education in New York City, and it's very, very liberal city, and very social justice orientated, and they want us to go to a lot of trainings and things like this. And I frustrate the hell out of all the trainers do not know what to do with this big white boy from Staten Island. They just don't know what to do with me, because they'll go through all their stuff, and I'll sit there and, well, what do you think, Mr. Taraco? I think you should just help somebody else that's less fortunate than you tomorrow. Keep it that simple and move on with your life. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to say. And it's not BS. If you're an AA member, if you're a participating AA member on the screen right now, you know that that's the truth. So be at your home group early. Look at that door, trained on that door for that man or woman that's coming into their first AA meeting. Their heads are down. They don't know what's going on. There is no hope there at all. You are that hope. Make them feel welcome. Give them a big book. Get them a cup of coffee. Sit with them. I don't care if they smell. I don't care if they're talking to themselves. I don't care what it is. My sponsor told me, go up to the ones that you wouldn't hang out with, Tom. Why do all your sponsees look like the guys you want to play golf with? All right, Joe, I'll diversify. What do you want me to do? I thought I was doing the right thing, It's our job. It's my job. My sponsor, Joe, passed after 23 years last November. And you never replace a guy like Joe Keegan. You just never do. Every Tuesday night at 9:30, he would listen to 6 nights of my written inventory. He would give me feedback, and I would take those suggestions, whether I agreed with them or not. And he would every now and then ask me questions that would just set me on my butt. Like, Tom, do you think you're the sponsee that you would want your sponsees to be? Think about that. We'll talk about it next week. Click. Like, oh my God, he just screwed up 7 days of my life. He doesn't even realize he did that. But he would tell me, consider that your son doesn't have the power to listen to you right now, that he's willingly disobeying you, and he's testing you. He would give me these considerations, these things that were worth millions of dollars in a therapeutic world or a psychotherapy world. He gave it for fun and for free. He opened his house to me. He listened to multiple fifth steps over the years. He saw me tank out at 10 years sober. The wheels came off at 10 years sober. He saw me through that. He did not fire me. He got me back on. He got me back in the game. So what do you do when a guy like that, passes to the next world? He taught me to the very day that he died. I called him 6 days before he passed, and he sounded horrible on the phone. And I said, Joe, you want to do this tonight? It's really, you're sharing nonsensical daily inventory of the little things that you're peeved at. And the guy's dying of congestive heart failure with no chance at a transplant. And he just said to me, I can listen. And he listened to that inventory. When I told him I didn't want to call anymore, he said, I need you to call. And until I pass, or unless you fire me, I'm still your sponsor. So you're going to take that direction. He said, because a half hour that I'm listening to your stuff, it's not a half hour I'm thinking about my stuff. He showed me how to die with dignity and grace in Alcoholics Anonymous, and to think about others right until the very end. That's just an amazing thing for me. I just, to experience that firsthand is just incredible. And I'll close with this, the little story about how I got a new sponsor. Some of you might know him, but I was really struggling with choosing a sponsor. And, Jimmy, I would love to have Jimmy A as my sponsor, but I don't think I could do all the setup and bullshit he tells his guys to do at the meeting. So, but I was leaning heavily on Jim for advice, because we do run in the same circles and we know a lot of the same guys. And I made a list of 3 guys. And Jim said to me, he said, I think you may want to consider you're taking a kind of an easier path there, Tom. I don't know if any of those guys will challenge you. And I said, well, this one I think I'm going to call. And he said, okay, let me know how it turns out. And I called him and he didn't have time for me. Definitely made my inventory that night, right? Look, I'm 25 years sober. I'm doing a deal. I got commitments. I'm sponsoring people. Why wouldn't you want to sponsor me, right? Turns out later that he thought we were a little bit too close and it would have been an infringement on our friendship, but that's not how I took it, right? So I called Jim back. I said, Jim, he said, no, I'm like taken back here. I don't know what. He said, Tom, forget about the other 2. Just pray. Just pray. The answers will come to you, and that's what we have to do here. I said, okay. I hung up the phone from Jim and I start praying. My phone rings. My home phone rings. Nobody ever uses my home phone. It's always the cell phone. And I pick it up and I'm in the basement. Tommy T, Harold Long here, Missouri. How are you? And I'm like, I put my hand on the phone. I look up and I said, oh no, God, not this guy, please. I don't know if you know Harold. He is like the busiest dude in AA. And when I asked him to talk to me at a men's retreat, he said, yeah, meet me at 5:30. We'll have coffee together. And I'm like, in the morning? Bro, this is like a vacation for me. 5:30 in the morning. I was afraid of this guy. And he said, Tommy T, I'd be more than happy to walk this journey with you hand in hand. Right? And I said, that's great. And I said, he said, do you have any AA commitments? And I said, yes, I do. I'm the GSR in Staten Island's service sponsorship chair. I'm the treasurer of my home group. And he said, no, not that stuff. Do you have any real commitments? Are you going to the institutions or the jails? No, but I guess I could call it. Well, you call it the group and you do that. He said, Tommy, I want to make a covenant with you. Up here, we call it spiritual consent, But he said, you mind if I take your wife's phone number? And I said, no, that's fine. You can have her number. And he said, and what about those kids you're always talking about? Can I have their number too? I said, yeah, but you might get a little bit different answers from the kids. He says, well, I'm only going to call them if I think you're lying to me. But, our deal is that we tell each other the truth. I'm going to tell you what's going on in my life. You're going to tell me what's going on in yours. And I got to tell you, fast forward now, it's probably 13 months I'm with Harold. God hit it out of the park for me. Harold keeps me legit. I meet with Harold every Monday at 5:30 on Zoom. We look at each other's eyes. I share inventory with him. I tell him what's going on. I sit like a student. I'm 62 years old, 26 years old. I have a book out when I call this man. And when he gives me a consideration, I write it down. And then the next week, I start my conversation with, well, I took that consideration and this is what happened. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to be sponsored that way, but I'm telling you, this guy, with the life that I led, I need it. Not only do I need Harold, I need Jimmy. And I also have a third guy, Bob B. in Minnesota, that keeps me right-sized. But then also the guys that I sponsor, Mike and Sal, and these guys that we walked this journey for 10, 15 years together, they keep me more right-sized than anything else. It is a wonderful life. It's our unfair advantage. And I'm really glad, Phil, that I was able to come here and talk and get this talk out of the way and not disappoint you again, my friend. So thanks for having me. Thanks, folks.